They were ordinary people doing things that seemed harmless, or at worst, reckless fun. But what started as jokes or moments of joy quickly spiraled into something way darker. Join us as we discover the details of these real tragedies that unfolded in ways no one saw coming. What happens when absurdity turns fatal? What was meant to be an uneventful overnight flight from Moscow to Hong Kong became one of the most haunting aviation disasters in history, the result of a reckless decision. Aeroflot Flight 593 departed Sheremetyevo International Airport on March 23, 1994, carrying 75 people aboard an Airbus A310, bound for Kai-Tak Airport. Operated by Russian International Airlines, the flight included mostly Russian nationals, with about 30 airline employees and their families, as well as several businessmen from Hong Kong and Taiwan. On board were Captain Andrei Danilov, First Officer Igor Piskaryov, and Relief Captain Yaroslav Kudrinsky, an experienced pilot with over 8,900 flying hours. Kudrinsky had also brought along his two children, Yana and Eldar, on their first international trip, a decision that would prove catastrophic. It was shortly after midnight, roughly halfway through the flight, and the plane was cruising over Siberia. Captain Kudrinsky invited his two children into the cockpit. He wanted to let them experience flying. At 12:43 a.m., Yana, age 13, was seated at the controls while Kudrinsky subtly adjusted the autopilot's heading to give her the illusion of turning the plane. She had no real control. A few minutes later, Eldar, aged 15, took his turn in the seat. What followed was a sequence of devastating mistakes. By moving the control stick for over 30 seconds, Eldar unknowingly partially disengaged the autopilot. The crew, unfamiliar with the aircraft, didn't notice the change. And then, the aircraft began a slow but steady roll to the right. As the bank angle increased, the pilot started noticing something was amiss. In just seconds, the aircraft tilted beyond 45 degrees, then past 90, an angle the Airbus A310 was never meant to sustain. Gravity forced the plane into a rapid descent, and the increased G-forces hampered the crew's movements. The autopilot, only partially engaged, attempted to correct the climb and maintain altitude. This caused the plane to stall, and finally the autopilot disengaged entirely, leaving the crew with full manual control. Kudrinsky managed to return to his seat and told his children to return to their seats. The situation was dire. The pilots tried to correct the mistakes, but it was no use. The plane began spinning. They recovered briefly, just long enough to attempt another correction, but the plane started spinning again. By then, the aircraft had lost too much altitude. At 12:58 a.m., 16 minutes after Yana first entered the cockpit, Aeroflot Flight 593 slammed into the Kuznetsk-Alata mountain range at roughly 160 miles per hour. All 63 passengers and 12 crew were killed on impact. No distress call was made. The landing gear was up. All passengers were secured in their seats, having been prepared for an emergency, though they had no way of knowing the true extent of the danger. The wreckage, strewn across a remote Siberian hillside, was discovered 2 days later, and flight data recorders were recovered soon after. In the aftermath, Aeroflot initially denied any breach of protocol in the cockpit. But when a Moscow-based magazine published transcripts from the cockpit voice recorder, the truth emerged. The final moments captured chilling warnings from Kudrinsky to his children, including a desperate plea for Eldar to move to the back of the cockpit. He attempted to soothe them with reassurances that everything was normal, when in fact the situation was out of control. Investigations found no technical faults with the aircraft. Analysts concluded that had the crew allowed the autopilot to correct the aircraft's initial dive without interference, the plane would have stabilized and the crash might have been avoided. The accident served as a grim reminder of the consequences of disregarding cockpit protocols. For the families of the victims, especially those who had placed their trust in an experienced crew and a reputable airline, the emotional toll was immeasurable. In the years that followed, mourners from Russia, China, and Taiwan visited the crash site, leaving flowers, handwritten notes, and fragments of memories scattered across the desolate hillside where 75 lives had ended in silence. He thought he'd gotten away with murder, literally. But just as Joseph McKinnon was finishing what he started, something else happened. Something far beyond his control. In the end, it wasn't law enforcement or neighbors who stopped him. It was karma arriving swiftly and without mercy. 60-year-old Joseph McKinnon lived in the quiet town of Trenton, South Carolina, with his longtime partner, Patricia Ruth Dent, age 65. A relatively unremarkable presence in the small community, Joseph gave little reason for suspicion. There were no known incidents of domestic violence at their residence, no calls to police, and no red flags that would hint at the grim events that would unfold one Saturday morning in May. That morning, as neighbors saw Joseph working in the yard, few gave it a second thought. He told one of them the hole he was digging was for a water feature. But in truth, the real reason behind the freshly dug pit was far more sinister. As Saturday progressed, Patricia failed to report to her job at the Mount Vintage Golf Course. Known for her reliability, her absence triggered immediate concern. Co-workers began calling and texting as early as 7:30 a.m., but none of their messages were answered. Meanwhile, outside her home, Joseph continued working over the grave he had dug the day before. According to the investigation conducted by the Edgefield County Sheriff's Office, Joseph had attacked Patricia inside their shared home. There were signs of a struggle, blood evidence later confirmed to be hers, and signs that the house had recently been cleaned. Patricia had been struck in the face, though the autopsy later confirmed that her cause of death was strangulation. After killing her, Joseph bound her body with tape, wrapped it in black trash bags, and dragged it through the home to his truck, which remained parked in the yard. From there, he drove the body to the back garden where the shallow pit awaited. Joseph was nearly done burying Patricia when everything unraveled. Neighbors noticed him lying motionless in the yard just before 10 a.m., prompting a call to emergency services. A neighbor attempted chest compressions before first responders arrived, but by the time deputies and medical crews reached the scene, Joseph was already dead. With no immediate signs of trauma, authorities initially suspected a natural cause, later confirmed to be a cardiac event, an apparent heart attack. But the investigation didn't end there. With Patricia still unaccounted for, deputies began searching the property more thoroughly. That's when they uncovered the trash bags in the freshly filled grave. The bags were carefully unwrapped, and Patricia's body was found inside, bound and hidden beneath the soil Joseph had been feverishly shoveling before collapsing. The discovery prompted a full forensic investigation. The pit, the truck, the cleaned house, and the timeline all aligned with witness statements, enabling law enforcement to piece together the final hours of the couple's lives. The results of both autopsies solidified what investigators had already suspected. Joseph had murdered Patricia, then died while attempting to hide her body. For the town of Trenton, a place with a population of barely 200, the incident was deeply unsettling. Residents expressed shock, unease, and sorrow. Some worried about safety, while others struggled to comprehend how something so brutal could happen right next door. Among those devastated was Patricia's twin sister, Pamela Briggs, who described her sibling as energetic, kind, and beloved by everyone she met. According to Pamela, a part of her was gone forever, taken in a moment of violence no one had seen coming. In the end, Joseph McKinnon's attempt to cover up a murder was halted not by intervention, but by the failure of his own heart. What began as a seemingly harmless act of late-night fun at a Southeast Texas marina quickly spiraled into a devastating tragedy. Wanting to have a little fun, Tommy Woodward shrugged off clear warnings and entered dangerous waters, literally and fatally, setting off a chain of events that left witnesses traumatized and a community reeling. It was the 3rd of July, 2015. 28-year-old Tommy Woodward had recently relocated from St. Louis to Orange, Texas, alongside his twin brother. The two were trying to rebuild their lives and had found work at a nearby shipyard. Known around Burkert's Marina as a regular face, Tommy was outgoing and carefree. Every Thursday night, he could be found playing pool and shuffleboard with friends, enjoying the relaxed atmosphere of the marina's small restaurant that served burgers and beer. But on that particular night, Tommy's usual routine took a dark turn. Sometime after midnight, Tommy arrived at Burkert's Marina with a young woman, his girlfriend. Despite the late hour and multiple warnings, he declared his intention to jump into the bayou that ran along the property. Staff and witnesses told him not to, pointing out the large, recently spotted alligator and a posted sign that read, "No swimming, alligators." The sign had only gone up days earlier, after employees noticed a predator estimated to be over 11 feet long circling the area. Ignoring both the sign and the verbal warnings, Tommy removed his shirt and wallet, uttered a dismissive remark about the alligators, and leapt into the dark water. According to authorities and witnesses, the attack happened almost immediately. He surfaced once, yelling at his girlfriend to get out. Then he was pulled under, resurfaced face down, and was dragged beneath the surface again by the massive alligator. His girlfriend, unharmed, had either jumped in after Tommy or had been in the water already, according to conflicting witness accounts. Either way, she made it to safety, shaken and screaming that an alligator had taken him. Witness Michelle Wright, an employee at the marina and friend of Tommy's, rushed to the edge of the water and spotted his body briefly with a flashlight before it disappeared once more. The horror was overwhelming, and for those who saw it happen, it was an image they said they would never forget. Emergency services responded around 2:30 a.m. Officers with the Orange Police Department and a Texas Parks and Wildlife game warden searched by boat for hours. Around 4:30 a.m., Tommy's body was recovered near the bayou's edge. He had suffered severe trauma to his left arm and upper chest. Authorities believed he ultimately drowned, but portions of his body were later found inside the animal, confirming the deadly force of the attack. The alligator had vanished during the initial response, but just days later, a local man known as Bear admitted to trapping and killing the creature using chicken as bait. The reptile, a 400-pound, 11-foot male, was found near the marina and shot dead. Texas Parks and Wildlife officials later confirmed that Tommy's remains were inside the animal. Though Bear violated hunting laws by taking matters into his own hands, he was only issued a warning and not charged. According to officials, unprovoked alligator attacks are extremely rare in Texas, making this the first fatal incident in recorded state history. However, those weeks had seen increased alligator activity due to heavy rainfall and the animal's nesting season. Alligators, territorial by nature and opportunistic predators, become particularly aggressive during that time of year. Tommy's family and friends were left devastated, struggling to process a preventable tragedy that unfolded in front of their eyes. The marina staff, especially those who had warned him moments before, remained haunted by the outcome. His twin brother, who had moved with him for a fresh start, was left to identify his body and face a future forever altered. Though the alligator was eventually captured and killed, it brought little solace. One decision to defy nature's dangers had cost Tommy Woodward his life. What began as a daring and heartfelt mission to raise funds for a noble cause ended in tragedy when a Brazilian priest's attempt to bring attention to a project close to his heart backfired in a way no one could have foreseen. In April 2008, Adelir Antonio de Carli, 41, was a Roman Catholic priest widely known in Brazil as the Balloon Priest. He was born on February 8, 1967, and raised under difficult circumstances. Following his parents' divorce, Adelir lived with his mother in Paraguay until her death when he was just 15. Returning to Brazil, he worked various jobs, first as a tire repairman alongside his father, then at his uncle's gas station, and also painting tablecloths to make ends meet. Despite his humble beginnings, he was an excellent student and known for his quiet demeanor. Unexpectedly, he joined a seminary in Paranagua and was ordained in August 2003. By 2004, he had become head of his own parish, where he developed a deep commitment to social work. One of Adelir's major undertakings was the creation of the Pastoral, a rest and spiritual support area for truckers passing through the port city of Paranagua. He held masses in the port's patio and took an active role in defending the rights of marginalized citizens, including the homeless. His activism led to multiple arrests, including the city's municipal security secretary. The same year, he protested the removal of small diners from the port area, successfully halting their eviction. Seeking to raise awareness and funding for the Pastoral, Adelir planned to break the world record for cluster balloon flight time, 19 hours suspended in the air. Although he took survival and mountain climbing courses in preparation, his history with aviation was uneven. He had previously been expelled from a paragliding course in Curitiba for refusing to attend theory classes and disobeying his instructor. Still, in January 2008, he completed a successful 4-hour flight from Ampere to Argentina using 600 balloons and reaching an altitude of over 17,000 feet. On April 20, 2008, Adelir made his second and final attempt. After celebrating Mass that morning, he lifted off from Paranagua in a chair strapped to 1,000 brightly colored balloons. Though the weather was rainy and overcast, he pressed forward equipped with a parachute, waterproof gear, a global positioning system, satellite and mobile phone, a flotation device, and enough food and water for 5 days. His intended destination was Dourados, over 700 kilometers away, where his brother Marcos lived. Early on, he ascended much higher than expected, reportedly up to 19,000 or even 20,000 feet. 8 hours into the flight and about 30 miles off the coast, he contacted the Paranagua Port Authority and passed along his coordinates. He also reported being very cold and struggling with his global positioning system. It was his last known communication. That night, search operations began involving the Brazilian Navy, Air Force, and local firefighters. Although debris from the balloon cluster was found floating in the ocean days later, the search was called off by April 29th as hopes of finding him alive faded. It wasn't until July 4th, 2008, that the lower half of a human body was spotted by tugboat workers roughly 100 kilometers from the city of Mackay. Based on the clothing and other materials, authorities suspected it was Adelir. Deoxyribonucleic acid tests confirmed the identity weeks later. His remains were returned to Paranagua, where churchgoers greeted him with applause. A memorial mass was held in his honor, and he was buried in a special chapel. Though his life ended in tragedy, Adelir's legacy lived on, marked by a bold attempt to serve his community. It began as a reckless thrill, an attempt to chase a kind of adrenaline rush that had been inspired by online videos. But for Francois Halle, what started as a dangerous stunt quickly turned into something far more tragic, an irreversible moment that left his friends in shock and a community in mourning. At 22 years old, Francois was described by those who knew him as fun-loving and adventurous. The young man was part of a tight-knit group of friends in Quebec who had recently taken a growing interest in a viral stunt known as couch surfing. Inspired by videos posted online, the activity involved sitting on a couch or sofa tied to the back of a moving vehicle, often a truck or van, and being dragged at high speeds along rural roads. For Francois and his friends, it became a way to break the routine, to feel alive, and to chase a thrill without fully considering the consequences. One day in February 2012, Francois was riding on a couch that had been mounted on top of a sled and tied to the back of a van. The group of friends had chosen a country road in Saint-Benjamin, a rural area located south of Quebec City, where they believed traffic would be light and the setting ideal for another round of what had become their favorite activity. Driving the van was 21-year-old Alex Labe, a friend of Francois and a regular participant in these outings. By all accounts, the group believed they had figured out a way to make the stunt safe enough to repeat regularly, drawing false confidence from past experiences where nothing had gone wrong. But everything changed that day. As the van picked up speed, the sled and sofa setup trailed behind, with Francois holding on, seated and exposed. But at some point during the ride, Alex lost control of the van. The sled swung violently, and the couch carrying Francois veered into the opposite lane. It all happened in an instant. An oncoming vehicle struck the sofa directly, the impact catastrophic. Francois was thrown and left critically injured on the roadside. Emergency services rushed him to the hospital, but the severity of his injuries proved too great. He was pronounced dead shortly after. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, Alex fled the scene. He was later arrested at his home in St. George. According to police, he was in shock, overwhelmed by the sight of his friend lying lifeless on the road. A mutual friend of both men, Jan Laflamme, later said that Alex's flight was not about avoiding accountability, but rather a moment of panic. He described Alex as distraught, struggling to process the horror of what had just occurred. Alex was arraigned in court in Saint-Joseph-de-Beauce and faced multiple charges: dangerous driving causing death, criminal negligence causing death, and fleeing the scene of an accident. For the group of friends who had once embraced couch surfing as harmless fun, the tragedy forced a reckoning. They openly acknowledged that what once seemed like an exciting way to pass time was, in truth, a deadly risk. Jan, who had often joined the stunts, admitted they were drawn in by the appeal of the videos they saw online. Francois is believed to be the first person to die while attempting the viral activity, a grim milestone that underscores the lethal consequences of imitating dangerous stunts for entertainment.